Let's start with King Charles's visit to the United States.
It's good to see that Trump himself enjoys his company.
Yeah. Friedrich Merz raised the issue of potentially exchanging Ukrainian territory for EU membership.
The negative side to all of that is that the minute you give Putin...
Russia now is literally on fire. How are these developments being perceived in Europe?
Ukraine has demonstrated that Russia is not the superpower that it wishes it was.
Why does Trump seem to trust Putin and ignore reality?
He admires Putin because Putin has what he doesn't have.
Hello, you're watching Russia Unmasked. I'm your host, journalist Andriy Bogdanovich. In this project, we talked about events in Europe and around the world, expose Russian manipulation and propaganda, and analyze what's happening so we can understand where it might all lead. Thank you for your comments and likes on our YouTube channel Russia Unmasked, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Today we are speaking with British professor Tony Meehan. Mr. Meehan has decades of experience in public relations, and that perspective is especially valuable for the topics we are about to discuss. Hello, Mr. Meehan.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, whatever time you're looking at this podcast. Welcome to Russia Unmasked, and Andrei, always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. So let's start with King Charles's visit to the United States, his first one, as far as I remember, since 2007. What was the purpose of this visit? Personally, what stood out to me were the King's joke about Trump, very much in that classic British style, about language, about White House, and along with his call to support Ukraine.
I agree with you, all of those points. If I can add a minor correction, Charles, as king, first visited America this time, so that's 2026. However, his previous visits date back to 2015, 2018, as well as 2007. So this is his, and at that time he would have been the Prince of Wales. So that's why perhaps you haven't got his up-to-date schedule on that one. He has a great sense of humor, and he's also despite his position, he's self-deprecating, he is humble, and his comment, for example, about the difference between the language. Although we both speak English, you speak American English, I speak English. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's basically what he was saying. But that entertained those that were listening to him in the Senate, which I think was good. He has a good relationship with Donald Trump, and it's good to see that Trump himself enjoys his company. And there were lots of photographs about the visit, during the visit, some of which were you would never do as an English person. You would never touch His Majesty's leg, or you would never show an embrace to a member of the royal family. But he gets away with it. He does it. And I think, again, Donald Trump is impressed by power. And he's impressed by position and status. And no matter where you are in the world, who you are in the world, if you've got status or position that he considers to be higher than his, which is difficult to understand, but he does, then he actually respects it and goes from there. Mm-hmm. Next question, sir, please.
Okay, the second topic, recent statements from Germany's leadership. Yeah. Friedrich Merz raised the issue of potentially exchanging Ukrainian territory for EU membership. What was the context of that statement? What did he actually mean?
This is a tricky one. You and I are both extremely pro-Ukrainian, and therefore see no justification or right for Ukraine to give anything to Russia other than a bloody nose and the war dead that it currently has. Merz is being pragmatic. Merz is being German. He's being in his mind realistic. This war can go on for 5 years, 10 years, maybe longer, depending how long Ukraine can depend on the support of the EU, depend on the support of NATO, depend on the support of others. And I think that Merz is seeing the reality from his perspective is that if Russia wants 10%, 5% of the land that it currently owns or currently has controls, it doesn't own, of Ukraine, in order to protect the so-called Russian-speaking Ukrainians, then evaluate that against more dead, more war, more costs, more this, and use the break to rebuild Ukraine for a prosperous future. I think that's my interpretation of his thinking. However, the negative side to all of that is that the minute you give Putin 1 mile, he'll want 2. Equally, there's no guarantee, depending on what guarantees you get, but in real terms, there's no guarantee that Putin will not return either to Ukraine or another country in one of the Baltic states in order to again extend the Russian Empire. It's a big question. It seems an easy question with a logical answer. I just think it's a big question with a difficult answer, and I don't see Zelensky. I mean, one of the points that he makes is that for President Zelensky to hold a national referendum, and the Ukrainians that I know would never say yes to any term of deal that gives Putin what appears to be a success, a win, and also lose part of Ukraine to a Russian autocrat, dictator, etc. That's my interpretation.
Mm-hmm. And some positive news for Ukraine. Russia now is literally on fire. Ukrainian strikes are causing serious disruptions to Russia's oil transportation and storage. And in some areas, fires are leading to environmental disasters. How are these developments being perceived in Europe?
Positively, in a single word, but for many different reasons. Firstly, as we've said previously, that Ukraine has demonstrated that Russia is not the superpower that it wishes it was. It also shown that a small state with support, with defense support, both financial and military, can actually hold off the Russian bear. It also means that Europe is being protected by Ukraine. So therefore, positive. Also, Ukraine is using both the money and the military equipment to defend itself and to protect Europe at the same time. These are both things that Europe understands, that it's not going into somebody's back pocket. It's not. There doesn't appear to be any corruption for problems or whatever. So therefore, I think it is very, very positive. If you take the negative side for Russia, is that it's having a massive impact on the economy in Russia, a negative impact. It's also having a negative impact in amongst the families of 1.33 million dead or wounded soldiers who have fought the battles for the last 4.5 years, and therefore Putin cannot ignore that, cannot hide that. And the reality is, at some stage, the Russian populace will actually ask the question, why are we doing this? Maybe they're asking it already, but because of the controls that he has on both the media and public demonstrations, that they're being prohibited.
Mm-hmm. And we continue Ukrainian theme. The story of stolen Ukrainian grain. Ukraine called on Israel not to accept Russian ships carrying Ukrainian grain. Israel responded by saying that such issues shouldn't be handled via social media, and that the evidence provided wasn't sufficient. The whole situation escalated online, and that communication itself led to tension between Israel and Ukraine. So the question is, how justified is it today to conduct diplomacy through social media, like Trump often does on his own platform, for example?
Yeah. The reason I'm pausing is I'm trying to figure out where to start with an answer for you on that. If we think about mass communication, go back to mass communication first and justifying it, you justify it by telling the truth. If you're not telling the truth, if you're using it for propaganda, if you're using it for lies, in other words, you can't justify it. If you go back 80 years, the first mass communication happened, and that was the fireside chats of Roosevelt, the speeches by Churchill, and others to the populations of North America and Britain and Europe during World War II. It has proceeded and progressed drastically since that time, whereby you have the President of the United States who has his own social media platform, Truth Social, which I think is the most incorrectly named platform I've ever heard of, because whilst it may be social, it's not sociable in its content. It's very negative in its content and aggressive, and much of the comment made is fantasy as opposed to truth. But anyway, so the question of justification is an important question. With regards to using it for diplomacy, I think diplomacy is best kept behind closed doors. Social media, whether it's on a web page or something else, is really for information, and it's not for diplomacy. What Trump uses it for is to push his arguments and his thinking, which I don't consider to be diplomatic, because there's a lovely story that appeared today where it referred to the meeting of Trump and the J.D. Vance in the White House, probably more than a year ago now, at which point the president of Ukraine was attacked by the vice president of America. And the question was of the withdrawing of financial support for Ukraine. And President Zelensky's response to that statement was that if you remove the funding and support, financial aid that you are giving Ukraine at the present moment, you are by default aiding and abetting and supporting Russia. And I think that is an exemplary example of diplomacy at work. And therefore, being diplomatic, you need to do it face to face. If you want to tell the world how great you are, then you do it on social media, and the world won't necessarily believe you're great anyway. So if we go back to the point on the Israeli grain, the interesting development is that the company that was importing that grain has left it on the ship. It has sent the ship back out into neutral waters, and it has made the commitment that it will not import any further grain from Ukraine on Russian vessels or anything else that has been stolen from Ukraine. So therefore, the politicians per se didn't necessarily get involved in it, but somebody with common sense, i.e. the person who placed the order, cancelled the order and sent the ship away.
Mm-hmm. And Russia's May military parade, this time reportedly without military equipment.
Yeah.
Could that be because there simply isn't any left after years of war against Ukraine?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, I mean, I looked this morning at a short list of losses of Russian heavy-duty equipment. So we're talking about high-value items, right? We're talking 500,000 500,000 of heavy military equipment, 12,000 tanks, 260,000 missiles, 100,000 drones, 800 different aircraft, and so on and so forth. So they clearly do not have the material and the heavy-duty military equipment to put on a parade. It's actively engaged in attacking and being aggressive against Ukraine.
So next question about it, aren't, more broadly, aren't military parades becoming outdated? What's their real purpose today?
Each military parade has a different purpose, but if we talk about the Russian military parade, the May Day parade, it is allegedly to recognize the success of Russia in defeating Nazi Germany. What that does is it allows the rulers of Russia to tell their people how successful and how wonderful and how brilliant Russia is, and that it reminds them, albeit in a perverse way, of the period of the Nazis, which in fact do not reflect anything in Ukraine or any other country today, except possibly Russia. But anyway, so the purpose is national pride, and also an exercise of national power over the population to just remind them who's in charge.
Mm-hmm. And finally, the Trump-Putin conversation. After it, Trump once again made some questionable claims. For example, saying that Ukraine has already lost and that we sank 150 ships. We hadn't any ships. Maybe he confused it with Iran, but the real question is, why does Trump seem to trust Putin and ignore reality?
The reason being is that this is a personal opinion, all right. So therefore, let's put this into perspective. There are other than his behavior and his comments, there is no further information on this. But anyway, he admires Putin because Putin has what he doesn't have. Donald J. Trump is probably the most powerful man in the world today. He is the president of the most powerful country in the world today, hence the reason of his power. But what he doesn't have longevity. He doesn't have continuous rule. He's bound by the Constitution of the United States of America to a 3-year, 4-year term each time he is elected. And he's also restricted to only 2 terms. So he looks at Putin, looks at what Putin does. Putin invaded Ukraine, Trump invaded Iran. Fine. Putin did this, Putin did that. He takes his political enemies, I'm talking about Vladimir Putin, his political enemies, whether they're real or imagined, either disappear or deported, or they finish up in a gulag somewhere, or they're thrown out of a second-story window dead. Donald Trump does it a different way. He attacks people who he perceives to be his enemies on his Truth Social platform, on the media, in the media. And therefore, for example, James Comey, the former Attorney General, I think that was his title, has been accused of encouraging negative attitudes and behavior towards Trump by posting a photograph of shells on a seashore. Whether that stands up in court will be interesting to see. But Trump has the reputation that he will attack, as we said in the last edition of this program. He has no fear in attacking the Pope, so he has no fear in attacking anybody. And he does, I think, a lot of it just to show his strength and to show his power. I don't think he's got any justification.
Mm-hmm. Tony, thank you. Thank you for your insights. Your answers really help us better understand the process unfolding around us. And to our viewers, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Russia Unmasked. We are Andriy Bogdanovich and Tony Meehan. See you in a week.
Thank you very much. Have a safe week.